COVID-19 virus is impacting women opposed to how it's impacting men. And I have that reservation just because we've been working so closely with so many families, all different types of families, by the way, who are in desperate need right now and who are really, really struggling just to maintain their basic lives. We've helped families that include, single moms, single dads, grandparents raising children, just everybody that you can think of is being negatively impacted by this virus right now. And I just want us to, do our best to remember that pretty much everybody is being negatively impacted by this. But if I have to talk about how women in general, specifically, and as a Black woman, I would be remiss to not talk about this from the perspective that I understand best, which is being a Black woman. The impact on women in this, particularly women who are single moms, is what I'm seeing the most of. Being a single parent, and I can tell you from my experience of raising all 5 of my children alone as a single parent, it's tough in normal circumstances, but to add trying to survive and maintain and care for your children and make sure your children are safe and secure during a global pandemic is something completely different, something that most of us would hope that we never had to imagine. I want to sort of preface all of this conversation by highlighting something very positive that I am seeing in all of this. And that is how Pittsburghers are just jumping in to support each other. If there was a way that I could bottle and package the compassion that I have seen over the last 4 to 5 weeks, I would. And I would put it in the mailbox of every single human. Just watching how people are just jumping in, not even asking questions, just basically saying, how can I help? What can I do? It's just incredible. It's heartwarming. And it makes the work that I do that much easier and that much more rewarding when I see people stepping up and supporting each other in such a beautiful way. And I'm not just talking about organizational leaders, although there are so many that who have reached out and offered partnerships and offered collaboration, which is something else that I would love to bottle and package for us to use later. It's just been incredible. And I think we really, really need to bask in the beauty of that, even though we're in the middle of something so dreadful and so ugly and so heartbreaking. Some of the things that I am seeing are something that I think most of us who do social service work and family development work, what's happening in our communities is not new to us. We've been highlighting the inefficiencies in systems and policies for a very long time. We've been talking about the cracks and the gaps that exist in equity for a very long time. This virus is highlighting it beyond anything I think any of us could have imagined. Folks who had little have even less now. We're seeing how vulnerable working folks have been. That old adage that we've been talking about, how close people are, how they're just one paycheck away from crisis and disaster. We're seeing that right now. We are seeing that folks just missing one paycheck can set off a firestorm of crises. And that is something that I am hoping, as Majestic mentioned, these are things that we should not forget when we are beyond COVID-19. These are things that we need to be proactively focusing on right now so that, we're not going back to our old normal. I've been hearing people say, I just want to get back to normal. Well, I don't want us to get back to normal. I want us to create a new normal that continues to highlight these inequities and the fragility of a lot of these systems and the fragility of people's financial situations, this is not how we should be living as a city or as a country. We should not have so many people so vulnerable to one crisis setting off an entire firestorm of events for us. So I really want us to, although I am happy on one end to see that when disaster strikes that we do all come together and all hands on deck and everybody's jumping in. I want us to continue that moving forward, because a lot of us have been ringing the alarm for a long time. And now is the time for us to listen to each other and come up with solutions and results so that something like this never happens again, and that folks are not left so vulnerable at the event of a crisis.
Thank you, Tammy. And I know we will come back to all of those comments, and I know we're going to have questions for you as well, but I really appreciate you putting this in context of poverty and those existing inequalities. And I think most of us couldn't agree more that we don't want to return to the old normal. So I appreciate that very much. I am going to turn it over now to Jada Sherrill, who's the CEO of Healthy Start. And Jada, I'm going to spotlight you and put you at the top here so everyone can see you. And I'm going to let you take it away. I hope that you're unmuted.
I think I am.
I can hear you. You're good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the work that Healthy Start is doing. Amidst this crisis, it's usually not a good thing to have to talk after Tammy, but you know, Tammy did a beautiful job of setting the context of how families are struggling, or how those struggles that have been occurring are being highlighted in the context of COVID. And so we're seeing the same thing in the families that we serve. So our mission is really centered around improving birth outcomes, focusing on birth equity, and focusing on decreasing and eliminating the Black-white disparity in birth, infant and maternal mortality rates. So there's been a lot of newsworthy articles, a lot of celebrity focus on infant and maternal mortality, but it's an issue that hits home. It's an issue that's very real in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, and it's an issue that's very prevalent in some of our communities that are already struggling with a lot of inequity. So our goal was really to look at the myriad of challenges that our families are facing right now, and address them either by referring to other folks in the community who are providing those broader meal delivery, crisis intervention services, but saying, what can Healthy Start do in the space of maternal and child health to support our families and especially our women? And where we saw a great need was we saw Black women really mobilizing around fear of birthing in hospitals during this COVID-19 crisis. We were seeing in chat groups and in discussions, women who wanted to quickly move toward unassisted home birth. And these are not necessarily women who had been considering home birth before, or who had been, you know, researching since their first trimester and had this as part of their plan, that these were outcomes of fear. In our city, you know, we have limits on who can come into the hospital to support and accompany a mom during birth. Thankfully, we are still allowing birth support people. At McGee right now, it's one support person. I was just on a webinar. It is Black Maternal Health Week, just so everyone is aware. That's an annual observance from April 11th through the 17th, which was started by Black Mamas Matter Alliance. And they've been doing webinars and events all throughout the week. And so yesterday was on a webinar, and in Ohio and some other parts of the country, they are not allowing anyone to accompany a pregnant woman while she is delivering her baby. So I just can't imagine what that feels like to be in a hospital alone, vulnerable, as a Black woman in particular, or as someone who doesn't speak English, or any of those other additional vulnerabilities beyond just the fact that you are giving birth, and not to have any support beyond hospital personnel during that experience. So what we're seeing locally, again, is that women are still allowed to have a support person, but some women don't have a support person for whatever reason. And with those limitations, for example, if a partner has been father of the baby is that support person, then if she had plans for a doula, that doula can no longer physically be there to support her. So what we're doing is mobilizing around providing virtual doula supports for women who either, don't have another support person, or who do, or who didn't even know that they would want or need or like to have a doula before, or couldn't afford it. So this enables us to give our moms, and when I say our moms, I'm really meaning any woman in the community who wants this support while we have the resources, but of course with a focus on supporting Black women, and because of the outcomes, because of what our moms experience and what they tell us. We need that additional support. They need that additional advocacy while they're giving birth. And, a lot of times it's not fair to put that even on the partner or the father of the baby. They don't know the changing hospital protocol from day to day or week to week. They don't necessarily know what procedures are right, wrong, or indifferent. They're there to support and enjoy the birth of the child like the mom is. So we will be able to provide technology to women and birthing people who would like to have it so that they can have a virtual doula during labor and delivery. So the scope of this service would include 2 prenatal virtual visits with their doula, support during labor and delivery, and 1 postpartum visit. When we think about what the trajectory of this COVID-19 crisis means even after delivery, when we see more moms being homebound, with children, with other people who they may or may not otherwise choose to be homebound with, and think about all of the nuances and realities of having just given birth, postpartum depression, getting adjusted to being a new mom, maybe having resource constraints, having other constraints or challenges. We know that there is going to be a lasting effect of this COVID situation. So our focus was really providing that birth support and making sure that our moms are connected to other community resources that are being delivered elsewhere.
Great, thank you so much, Jada. That's a really creative response as well, and I agree Pittsburgh is really responding in some amazing ways, and I appreciate everything you do every day, but that particular response with the doulas just sounds amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, next we have Nicole Molinaro, who's president and CEO of the Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh. I'm going to go ahead and put you up here.
And hopefully you're unmuted. With that wider view. Hi, everybody.
You can say hello, and then I'm going to share your slides when you're ready too.
Okay, wonderful. So hello, everybody. It's really such an honor to be here today with my co-panelists who I've just have admired and respected for so long. The one thing I did want to say before we get started is that, we're going to be talking about domestic violence or intimate partner violence. It can be triggering, so I just encourage you to practice self-care. If you need to step away, please just do what you need to do. I'll be speaking kind of quickly, and it's really difficult information to hear. So just wanted to put that out there. And you can start the slides anytime you want, Jesse. So when we're talking about COVID-19 and why domestic violence and intimate partner violence is increasing, it's very important to remember that domestic violence is actually a pattern of power and control that's used in a relationship that can encompass a spectrum of behaviors, abusive behaviors that can include psychological abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the pattern, and the power and control is a really important part to remember there. Typically, since we're talking about gendering the pandemic, it's easy to gender the pandemic in this case because typically domestic violence is a gender-based crime with around 80% of the victims or survivors identifying as women. We know, of course, that it can impact any socioeconomic status, any demographic, any relationship. And our baseline is that 4 women a day in the United States are killed by their partners. So we're already at a pretty horrific baseline. We've been talking about already existing inequalities, and this is definitely the case with domestic violence. We know it's very important to note that more at risk of physical and sexual violence and homicide are Black and African American women. And that's in those who are in same-sex relationships, those who are in straight relationships, and LGBTQIA are more at risk of domestic violence. So the good news here is that there is help and there is hope, because domestic violence programs are a protective factor. So only 4% of those who are killed have been active with the domestic violence program. So let's talk for a minute about the pandemic specifically. So we know that pandemics don't cause intimate partner violence. Oh, and you can change the slide, Jesse, sorry. We know that pandemics don't cause abuse, but we also know it makes sense that they would increase, right? Because domestic violence is triggered by somebody's need for control. And we all, I think, feel pretty out of control in today's world to various extents. So it just makes sense that, that the pandemic can trigger the use of abuse or control. We've seen, unfortunately, in some countries that are ahead of us with COVID-19 and some cities that are ahead of us, a threefold increase in domestic violence. And as a matter of fact, the United Nations Secretary General reported a sharp rise worldwide in domestic violence and what he called a horrifying surge because of COVID-19. So there's not a lot of data available yet because of such the short length of time. Even though it feels like we've been in this for 5 years, this is only week 5, believe it or not. But unfortunately, the early indicators show a doubling of murders. And specifically, we've seen 2 that I know of. I'm guessing that there are more, where the man in the relationship killed his wife or partner. In both cases, specifically because they were concerned that they were infected. He was concerned that they were infected with the virus, and in both cases they were not. You know, as we turn our attention for a second to the local trends, unfortunately, we've seen in the city of Pittsburgh, police have reported that increased calls related to domestic violence, 20 to 30% increase. We've seen PFA, so this is the trend, right? So we see these, the need for help to go up because domestic violence is increasing. And at the same time, we see the ability to seek help decrease because there's less chance to really reach out for help if your abuser is with you 24/7, monitoring what you do. You can't go out of the house for work. You can't go out of the house for your social network. It's a lot harder to reach out for help. So because of that, we've seen protection from abuse filings go down over the 4-week period that ended on Saturday, total down 29%. Child abuse reports, which we of course know that child abuse is correlated with intimate partner violence in about 40 to 60% of relationships. The 4-week total, the filings for child lines is down 53%. And our calls to our Women's Center and Shelter hotline, and I don't know about the other hotlines, but this is our hotline, total calls are down 42%. So we're really talking about huge and scary decreases in the ability for people to reach out for help. So when we were asked to talk about what we're seeing, I turned to our staff. Our staff are incredible, fierce warriors. And you know what they've been seeing is just absolutely overwhelming and just quite honestly pretty depressing. Overall, what we're finding is that those, and this is for everybody, right? This is for regardless of the issue. I think those who are on the edge have been kind of pushed over the edge because of the virus. We're seeing an increase in the severity and the frequency of violence. Clients are reporting increased tensions, more serious physical and sexual violence. We found that safety plans are being impacted. So clients have to do new and really creative safety planning because of increasing tensions in the house, increasing tensions around communication with the children, about custody. We find that clients are not able to enact their safety plan, call for help or reach out for support, and that they've found it harder to financially save up to leave if they've lost their job or they're just unable to, you know, kind of hide the finances that they've been able to bring in. We've seen custody greatly impacted. We've seen abusers who are refusing to obey custody orders because using COVID-19 as an excuse. So they're threatening to not return the kids because they don't want the kids to get infected. We've seen abusers using COVID-19 as an excuse to not parent and to kind of remove themselves from parental responsibility. There's frustration around custody issues because if it's not serious abuse, then there's limited functioning in the courts right now. And if there's, you know, not huge problems, it really can't be addressed by the courts. And then supervised visitation is less accessible as well, because oftentimes family members are the ones who will deliver that, or they might be held in places in the community that are no longer open or accessible. So generally, there are so many obstacles in clients' lives to withdrawing PFA, and they're withdrawing PFAs because it's really just too difficult to deal with the custody exchanges, the unemployment, food security, all of the usual problems, as we've been saying, are so exacerbated during this time that it's like almost impossible to handle also dealing with a protection from abuse order. We, of course, this has been, as Tammy mentioned, we've seen increased financial need. We've definitely seen that as well. We've also unfortunately seen, and this is not specific to the city, we cover a wide area. We've heard about some misinformation from the police around filing ICCs, which are indirect criminal contempts, safety issues. We've seen folks being told that they're not arresting at this time, which police should definitely still be arresting for domestic violence when it would be normally warranted. So we've really just seen so many different needs. Again, I don't mean to be depressing, but this is really what we're seeing on the ground. On the bright side, we've seen in our shelter our clients who have just really expressed great gratitude for not being isolated with their abuser. And we've had quite a few of them say they just absolutely can't imagine being with their abuser, that if they were with their abuser right now, stuck at home, they would be dead. So Women's Center and Shelter has been trying really hard in every possible way we can to reach out to let victims and survivors know that there is help and there is hope. We just got word that we're working with Giant Eagle now to put information up in there by the registers. We're trying to work on a huge mailing. We're going to be working with the food bank and food distribution site. We're really trying so hard to reach victims in every possible way we can. We've also moved up the launch of our text chat and IM service that we'll be launching. It's pretty much ready right now, so we'll be launching it. We should hear about it next week. We're doing specialized outreach with our teams who work with refugees, immigrants, and limited English speakers and the LGBTQIA+ community. So really anything we can do, we want to be able to do. And we're excited to also have launched a new program. We're one of the 4 county providers that does battering intervention programs. We are now able to offer a phone service basically to anyone who uses abuse and control, who just wants to talk to somebody without committing to join a group or anything like that. But they can get counseling, they can get tools for behavior change, education. It's not intended as intervention, but it's not intended as intervention. It's intended as prevention. But we really want for people to call for help when they're afraid that they're going to be using abuse and control. There's really nowhere else to reach. So we're really encouraging folks to call that line as well. And all of our lines are down at the bottom. And I won't go into the policy issues and the systems advocacy issues, but as has been mentioned before, we've been working on the inequities that we've seen in the system in regard to domestic violence victims we've been around for 46 years. We've been working for pretty much that whole time on those issues to try to reduce the inequalities that are so glaring and that this virus is making even more glaring. And we continue to do that in many different ways. So thank you again so much.
Nicole, thank you so much for all of that information. And we are getting a lot of questions. I'm going to hold the questions for our speakers until after everybody's had a chance to speak. And what I really appreciate, because Pittsburgh is such a wonderful community, I see as some folks have been posting questions, others have been providing answers. So the chat room is a nice feature. You'll see people are popping in and out of there with some helpful comments. But we will, I promise, for those of you who are on the call, we will get some of these questions to our speakers. We have one more speaker, so I want to turn it over to her right now. Spotlighting the video right now. This is the amazing Ciara Thomas, who's of course the founder and executive director of Sisters PGH. Welcome, Ciara. Let's make sure everybody can hear you. And when you're ready, I will be happy to share your slides.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I firstly want to thank you, Dr. Ramey, for having me here today. It's a great privilege to be able to speak to our communities in this capacity. I also want to highlight our LGBTQI Advisory Council in the Mayor's Office. Our council is with our community in Pittsburgh as well. I'm a commissioner of our Pennsylvania Commission of LGBTQ Affairs, and we are also looking at Pittsburgh and Allegheny County to help in this time. So yeah, we can start the slides with our first slide. So on March 20th, my organization, Sisters PGH, we began a mutual aid fund. Through this mutual aid fund, we were intent on giving financial, like dollars, back to the community. And while in doing so, we were able to capture the need within our LGBTQIA community as of right now. We can go to the next slide, cool. So yeah, so this was our Pittsburgh COVID-19 LGBTQ plus emergency relief fund. I want to thank our partners in this, Christina Acuna Castillo, Jenny Beck. They were influential with my board members and us getting this together. Our objective, like I mentioned, was to provide mutual aid for our communities in Allegheny County. And as of April 14th, we have raised $18,557 to directly provide back to our communities. With our survey that we sent out to collect this information, and again, a huge thank you to Alex Schuler, Jess Bevan, Megan Branning for helping us put this information, this data together to really find out how our LGBTQ plus communities were experiencing during this pandemic. As of April 11th, we received 138 respondents, and the applications are still open. We'll still be collecting, but we wanted to stop it right here just to show everyone here today what we have now. Next slide. So by gender, looking at this information, it clearly indicates transgender women were the most affected by COVID-19. And it's worth mentioning how marginalized our women of trans experience, especially those that are Black and Brown, already were before COVID-19. So the pandemic coming into Allegheny County only pushed trans women especially deeper into the margins. So that's definitely, I wanna make sure that we're all thinking about our margins and intersections, you know, when providing services, because it goes as well, if you look at on this form where our trans women, cis women, and non-binary folk are in the spectrum. And just keeping your eye on that as we move forward in collecting this information, because unfortunately what it's looking like is those areas may grow. Just back a little more. Okay, cool. So these were the sexual orientations we were able to capture. As you can see, it was a very diverse LGBTQ plus community that we were able to capture as far as sexual orientation. And I also want to highlight, just being a trans woman in Allegheny County, we still aren't afforded the privileges of our cis counterparts within the community. And this also highlights the need for our state to be partnering with trans-led organizations, or community partners and cities to be partnering with trans-led organizations, not only in Pittsburgh or Allegheny County, but around the state. So next slide. So who did we reach? So age, I'd like to highlight that nearly half of the 138 applicants are young folk between the ages of 18 and 24, which tells us that a lot of what we already knew, that this age group is extremely susceptible to economic disadvantages. This was already apparent, and it's showing even within our LGBTQ plus community. So I'll jump to our race piece here. So this was definitely something that was huge for us. Again, I'm a Black trans woman. I know where I live. I know Allegheny County, and I know my community is struggling. So it put a broad effect on our intersectional communities, which did not include our LGBTQIA communities, or did, of Allegheny County. Those that were already suffering because of discrimination, like I mentioned earlier, found themselves in much more dangerous situations because of COVID-19. So due to our grassroots organizing and the work directly on the ground for the last 8 years, we were able to reach more LGBTQ plus Black people in Allegheny County. And again, I want to bring it back to reason we need to be thinking about partnerships when we're talking about how we include our communities inclusively in all communities. Yeah, next slide. I want to be brief. I'm definitely going to ask questions or, answer some questions, but I just want to get through this for the sake of time because we have a few slides. So employment. Here I would like to highlight the unemployment respondents, especially considering those who were unemployed before the pandemic because of discrimination or already prevalent economic sensitivities, and how harder it will be to even obtain employment after COVID-19. That's going to be a huge thing for the community, and not just our LGBTQ plus communities, but our communities at large. That's going to be a huge issue for us, for people to get back into employment, and it could turn into, it look like a different type of discrimination, a COVID discrimination, if I may. Those afraid of bringing that into their business or place of employment. So we have to think about that as well for the future. So by living situation. So the unemployed respondents who also represent a group are also represented a group of diverse living situations, and a large proportion out of the 138 respondents are renters, putting them at a high risk of eviction after the moratorium is lifted. So we're thinking about access to employment, access to resources and funds. When the moratorium is lifted, there's going to be intersections of communities that are going to be affected the worst during this. And this shows us here today which communities will be affected on this ripple effect of marginalization. You can go to the next slide. So what is the community saying? So these were the top 25 most mentioned words in our open responses. A lot of people were losing gigs because of COVID-19. I myself was losing speaking engagements, trainings, all kinds of things. We were getting ready to train a few people, and we had to stop because of COVID-19. Folks were getting laid off. They're not having enough money. Income was cut. There's no work. We have no food. So these were some top 25 most mentioned word in open responses within our LGBTQ plus communities right now. So who do we reach? So when we created this mutual aid fund, we created specifically for Allegheny County so that we could really centralize who was suffering within our county specifically. And here in the city, as you can see, the most need is in Bloomfield at 13.8%, Central Lawrenceville at 12.3%, and East Liberty and Larmer at 10.8%. These are in the city. These are areas that are being the most affected right now, according to what we have right now. Again, we will continue doing this work to find where the greatest need is. But as of right now in the city, this is showing up to be greatest needs area. In the suburbs, the most need is within Braddock Hills, Forest Hills, Wilkinsburg, Mount Oliver, and Edgewood and Swissvale. Braddock, Forest Hills, and Wilkinsburg at 9.3%, Mount Oliver at 9.3%, and Edgewood and Swissvale at 8.1%. So these are definitely areas to be looking at when we are discussing providing resources for. We need to be looking at these areas within our communities to also be supportive to our LGBTQ plus communities. See if there's anything else. All right, so we're on quotes. So this ties back into what some our speakers were talking about earlier, Jada, Nicole, of what people are experiencing while going through COVID-19. So I'll just read a few of these. Feel free to read through them. Any I skip. Both my wife and I are not working because of closures. We have a young son. I'm on unpaid leave, and things are getting rough with my elderly family with no income. I'm scared I may get sick or die. I was in the middle of interviewing with several companies when the quarantine started. This has affected me because any possible hiring opportunities, processes will be delayed due to the virus. This puts me in a state of emergency. So these are things that we are also hearing within our community of how they're being affected by COVID. So we did some needs assessments, of course. And we call this resource deprivation. And I would like everyone to leave here thinking about something along the lines of resource deprivation justice within our communities and what that would look like. Let me see here. From this graph, over 50% of assistance requests were related to either food, groceries, and toiletries, or rent and shelter. A sizable proportion of assistance requests included bills, utilities, phone, internet, and medical-related expenses. As of right now, our food and grocery and toiletries, we are preparing after we receive the funds from our GoFundMe, because GoFundMe is GoFundMe, and it just takes a while sometimes for things to get transferred over, but we will be preparing to deliver food to our LGBTQ plus communities of Allegheny County. We have our volunteers ready, and again, thank you so much to our volunteers on standby. We have about 20 volunteers that are ready to go deliver food and toiletries to our LGBTQ plus communities of Allegheny County. And just again, so yeah, moving forward, our financial support. So I'd like to start with mentioning ableism and how we must make sure that we are also showing up for those with disabilities who may need assistance, even washing their hands, taking their meds, or even getting to the doctor. So I would suggest us as a community to keep everyone in mind and to continue creating like innovative ideas that ensures all sectors of our communities are served. Because we take for granted a lot of things, like washing our hands. That's a #1 thing we're hearing. There are communities out there within our disabled communities who cannot wash their hands. So making sure that we show up for them. From this graph, among the respondents that affirmed unemployment, 80 out of 138 people, 14 are students, 10 are disabled, 1 is a veteran. Now we realize we're still very much at the early stages of this. So once we continue to reach out into our communities to ask what's the need, again, these numbers will grow. And what we hope to do with this information is also keep this beyond COVID, so we can understand what the need is within our LGBTQ plus communities moving forward in Allegheny County. Next slide. Now, let me see. So this was another needs assessment, hormone replacement therapy, HRT access. This was something, especially as an organization that focuses on transgender and non-binary people in Pittsburgh, this was really an all moment for us at Sisters PGH to find out 50% of respondents indicated that they were on HRT. Of 66 persons affirming HRT, 21, that's 33%, expressed concern over COVID-19 impacting their access to HRT. 80% of those concerns over HRT are Black, despite Black individuals comprising 50% of the respondents on HRT. And I'd like to highlight on this, because of the work we do at Sisters PGH, specifically providing housing and resources at our drop-in space for our trans and non-binary communities of Allegheny County, we were able to capture this essential information we have not been seeing being asked as a concern for our trans communities in any type of solicitation for information on a community. I would like to also highlight how dangerous it is to not have access to these hormones physically and mentally for transgender people, and how important it is to ensure trans and non-binary people are counted statewide so we know what's going on within these intersections of communities. Giving our reach and ties with the trans and non-binary communities, it is imperative that, again, and I just want to keep mentioning this, that the state invest in trans-led nonprofits, organizations, and groups in counties around the state of Pennsylvania doing grassroots work, so that we are a step ahead and we have this information within the state of Pennsylvania. So we talk about quarantine spaces, and again, Jada and Nicole had spoken on this earlier. We also were asking questions around being safe while being quarantined. this is a testimony of a person that applied for the fund. I lost both of my jobs in Pittsburgh, so I had to move back in with my parents. This is the first extended period of time I've been forced into spending time with my traumatizingly homophobic and transphobic Christian parents. I'm trying to find money to get back to living in my apartment in Pittsburgh and find a way to get back on my feet. So this opens a whole door as well. Thinking about our LGBTQ plus or people in back home with their families who are homophobic or transphobic and do not agree with their lifestyle or gender or orientation or what have you. So this is an active thing that is happening too.
And Ciara, we just have another minute for you. Sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine, you're fine. We can just go past, these are safe quarantine spaces. Again, we can answer questions about this. Next one. Oh, that's our last one. So yeah, please keep these things in mind. Again, we are open to questions. We are opening to dialogue with anyone who is ready and willing to dialogue. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Ciara, and sorry to rush you through. I know some people have to get back to other commitments at 1 o'clock, and before they do that, I do want to just make sure that each of our speakers has a chance to talk a little bit about what it is that you need, first of all, and we've had a lot of questions coming in through the chat about how to provide the resources that you've been sharing. So just again, everybody, we will be emailing folks resource collections. Our speakers have shared a number of things. We will get those out to everybody, including links for donation pages and others. Ciara just mentioned her GoFundMe. We'll make sure that everybody has those. But I do want to give each of our speakers a couple of minutes here right before we go. Maybe if you could each take a minute to talk about, thinking forward post-pandemic. What does the city need to do, or what would you like to be seeing? Is there something in terms of policy interventions, legislation? What should the city be thinking about right now as we rebuild together to really create a different community, a different beloved community? So I want to go back and let Tammy maybe take that question first, and we'll just give everybody a chance to run through thinking about that. So just 1 minute each, folks. And Tammy, I'm going to spotlight you again.
All right, I'm going to try to do this really quickly. So this is really hard for me to do quickly, but there's a couple of things, excuse me, that I have noticed since we have had to change all of our operations. We have shut down our all of our face-to-face work, including the work that we do around entrepreneurs. For those of you that don't know, Circles Greater Pittsburgh has a entrepreneurship program called Catapult Startup to Storefront, in which we have a retail incubator space in East Liberty called the Gallery on Penn. None of our businesses are open. We have shut down. We have been shut down for approximately a month now, and we have converted our retail space into a donation distribution drive. So we're accepting donations there, and we're actually doing distributions from that site. But it pains me every day that I'm in there to see the empty stores and the empty businesses of women who have been working so hard for the last 2 years, tons of work that they've put into, becoming successful business owners. And then for some of them, it feels like it's been all for nothing because they're going to have to start all over when this is over. And honestly, some of them may not be able to come back. That breaks my heart. I am noticing that a lot of the funding that is coming down from SBA and other places, some of these business owners are just not going to qualify for those loans. They are not in a good position and shouldn't be borrowing money at such a vulnerable part of their life. And I know people are saying it's forgivable. It is not going to be forgivable for everybody. These Black-owned, small, brand new startups are going to be the ones who are going to be the most hit by this, and we have to do something. We have to do something to support these business owners, not only after COVID-19, but during this. We have to keep them engaged. We have to support them financially. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have the answers. I know what we are doing from a Circle Greater Pittsburgh standpoint. We are doing everything we can to support them and keep them in business, but we need more help. I would ask the city to please try to think of anything that can be done to support small businesses to get them back on track and keep them alive.
Thanks, Tammy. So small business, women-owned businesses, entrepreneurs, really hurting. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your work in supporting all of those folks. Jada, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you need? What does the city need to do?
That's a really hard question, I think, to answer on the spot and in a minute. I think just in general, you know, there are a lot of legislative areas of support. I always like to highlight the Black Mamas Matter Alliance and all of their work and policy recommendations. And so as a point of reference for folks who want to dig a little deeper into maternal and child health and reproductive rights policy that puts equity and making sure that Black women's health is put at the forefront, I would suggest familiarizing yourself with some of that work. Things like, you know, expanding Medicaid expansion. So making sure that women's health services are not cut. Also looking at some of our just policies and practices, supporting paid family leave, things like that. All of those things are helpful. There's a lot of work that's being done locally around supporting paid family leave, and that doesn't only impact folks who are giving birth, it also impacts folks who are caregiving in other ways. There was one other thing I wanted to say, but I forgot. So I would say, please stay connected with Healthy Start. We have a lot of great things going on via our website and our social media. We'd also like to hear how we can continue to support communities. So you can support us, of course. You can donate, you can volunteer. We have a community action network. We have lots of community-based projects where we put the voice of our moms and the voice of residents at the forefront. But it's also important for us to be hearing from and be responsive to what's going on in communities. So I think one way of supporting is just staying connected with us. But again, I would just want to uplift the policy recommendations that are outlined in the Black Mamas Matter Alliance policy statements. They are universal policies that can be adopted anywhere. I know we have some relatively new legislation around racism as a public health issue. Not sure where that stands or what that looks like in practice. But really, you know, putting ourselves behind some of the policy recommendations that no longer allow Black women to be victimized as we expand our families and as we seek reproductive rights.
You did it, Jada. That was great. I know I'm only giving everybody a minute, and I appreciate you. Thank you for those comments. Nicole, you have a minute. I know it's not fair to only give you a minute, but go ahead.
No, that's okay. My answer is really that this could be its whole own meeting. We are working on so many different policy initiatives that we were before this happened, and you know we're going to have to really double down because we know that we are going to have so much increased need for services once survivors can safely reach out for help. So we are going to be absolutely inundated with people who need help. So collaboration with the city, with partner organizations in the city. I mean, Pittsburgh's amazing. So really just being able to collaborate, get the word out, and work together to really help those who are in such great need. And just before Ciara goes, I would just say your virtual background and your slides are so on point. I'm so jealous. But I'm done with the policy question.
Thank you, Nicole. Ciara, I'm spotlighting you and your beautiful background. Take it away.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, of course, thank you, everyone. You can go to our website, www.sisterspgh.org, for any more information to donate to our organization. You can also find information about the fund, the mutual aid fund, there as well. Something the city can do is get get trans inclusion trainings from trans people. So if we can do that in city partners, that would start helping with including our trans communities on things that we need our trans communities included on. Sisters PGH, we provide that training to organizations and to spaces. So if you know anyone who needs that, feel free to send them our way. And again, I just want to leave everyone with light and love. Stay safe, stay in, and Ashe.
Thank you, Ciara. And thank you, Jada. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Tammy. It's been marvelous having all of you on with us today. You are doing the incredibly important and hard work of gender equity in our communities every day, and we really appreciate you. We appreciate our communities. We are all in this together. We will be sharing out all of those resources that you have shared with us, and we will try to get some more information. And let's do this again. This was really helpful, and lots of praise and love coming in on the chat for all four of you. So thank you again to each of you, and thank you to everybody who was with us today. We appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Bye. Stay safe and healthy, everybody. Safe and healthy.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
I'm going to let the chat continue, and then I will save it.
Thank you, Anu. We'll get everything there. Appreciate that.
Thank you.